2026 marks a turning point. Artificial intelligence is no longer just a tool. It's shaping industries, accelerating innovation, and redefining how humans build, create, and solve problems. From engineering and medicine to finance, infrastructure, and everyday life, AI has become one of the most influential forces on the planet. That's why, for 2026, we recognize AI as Techstrong's Person of the Year. Not for what it replaces, but for what it enables. A future built together, humans and machines. Predict 2026. Join us.
Hey everyone, what are you doing watching this? If you're watching this live, Predict 2026 is also live right now. You've got to go to predict2026.com. You can register and get right in. See what virtually the entire Futurum analyst team predicts for the 2026 year and what's in store. Don't miss it. But here's the good news. I know what you're saying. Shimmy, I can't miss your show. I'm going to watch the gang. That's okay. The Predict 2026 videos will be available on demand there as well. So after the gang then, head over to Predict 2026. You'll still catch most of the day, and anything you miss, you watch on demand. Go figure. Welcome to Techstrong Gang here on Thursday, January 15th. Let me welcome our gang members. We've got Fred Wilmot, Gina Rosenthal. For the first time since the new year, our friend Guy Currier. And of course, our man in the Valley, Jon Swartz, and our man in New York, Mike Vizard. I'm Alan Shimel. Welcome to the gang. Mike, let me kick things right off. Yes, today is Predict Day, and AI is Techstrong's Person of the Year. I know what you're thinking.
Well, let's just dive into it because it is a somewhat controversial conversation in general. There are folks out there who would argue that treating AI like a person is a fundamental mistake. It's bad for your mental health. It plays into a narrative put out by a bunch of vendors of these tools that are trying to make them addictive to you, and it has nothing to do with the actual output of these things. They're just a tool. So why are we kind of treating them like people? I mean, I'm kind of in that camp. I'm all for AI, but for crying out loud, it's a machine.
Fair enough, and I respect your opinion, Doctor. But I wrote an article on this up on DevOps.com if people are really interested in diving a little deeper. But if you're going to blame anyone on this, blame me. I did it, right? And the reason I did it was for a couple of things. Number one, obviously, I was playing on the Time Man of the Year or Person of the Year. I don't know if Time has changed it to Person of the Year, as they still call it Man of the Year. Gina, you're shaking your head. They moved it to Person?
I'm pretty sure they moved it to Person, yeah.
Good. Long time coming. But keep in mind, I picked this theme way before Time came out with their Person of the Year this year, which happens to be the architects of AI, right? The 7 or 8 CEOs, leaders of the bigger AI companies. So it was a bit of a tongue-in-cheek on the Time Person of the Year thing. But the other thing is, Mike, we may rail against it and we may think we're smarter than the average bear, but the fact of the matter is the population, by and large, is evolving these relationships with AIs that are very personal, very personable, right? We've got 100 and something lawsuits of people suing AI because they were using it as a therapist, or it encouraged teenagers to commit suicide. But unfortunately, the truth is a lot of people are carrying on relationships with AI almost as if it was a person. There are days I worry about our friend Chris Blask. I love him dearly.
Somewhere I'm hearing my mother say, if everybody jumps off a cliff, are you going to jump too?
Well, maybe that makes you a lemming, though.
The other thing is, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
The other thing is, I kind of think back to the early days of the internet, right? Like AOL days, like when it first started getting going. And remember the comic that said everyone on the internet is a dog because you know who you're talking to on the other side? There were bots back then. They were easier to figure it out, because of the simplicity of how they work. But I think it's very, very dangerous path to go down. It was then and it is now.
It may very well be, but this ain't your mother's AOL we're talking about.
Right? No, fine.
I think for Techstrong to choose AI as the person of the year is brilliant. I think if Time had chosen AI as the person of the year, that would have been horrible. Or any other, let's say, mainstream media outlet, because the Techstrong audience, and Techstrong is about IT, especially business IT, where all over the place we are explaining everywhere, and we expect our audience largely knows this is not a person. It's not even, Mike, with all due respect, calling it a machine, I think is a mistake, because what it is a simulation, and there is the rub. That is the whole issue. It is designed to seem like a person, while it has none of the other aspects of a person. And furthermore, that's really generative AI or LLMs more than AI as a whole. So by picking AI as person of the year, let's say it's a sarcastic choice, and that's really helpful to say that it really is not a person at all, except possibly one day in the legal sense, much like corporations are people in the legal, or persons in the legal sense.
Until we identify some sort of new entity that sits between man and machine, it's a machine. John?
I'm more. You're not wrong. I just think that's a bad label for it. But go ahead, John.
So I'm like Mike. I'm more about people than product. But in this case, AI is so inescapable. And in fact, I might make the argument that in future persons of the year, we might have agentic AI, or we might have physical AI. I mean, this kind of reminds me of like the record number of covers maybe Time had of, I think it was Nixon, and for SI it was Jordan or Ali. I think it's inevitable in what we're doing. I mean, no matter how we categorize it, it is the driving force, the major driving force in everything we use and everything we write about. So it's a great acknowledgement. But I also think this is just the beginning of seeing AI as a dominant theme or narrative in everything we do in every industry for the next decade.
See, I don't understand why we can't just talk about what it is. I agree with Mike 100%. I'll just go out there and say that. There was an article put out by Emily Bender, who is one of the authors of the Scholastic paper. So she's a linguist and she teaches, I forget where she teaches, she's a professor. And Nana Ania, I don't know how to say her last name, it's INIE, about the dangers of applying human of talking about AI and assigning it a human identity or anthropomorphizing any of it. And I know when I first started doing marketing for AI, it wasn't AI, it was HPC and machine learning and deep learning. And they yelled at me if I tried to talk about AI is thinking, or AI is doing, or AI is learning. No, it's not. People are making all of the machine parts appear like that's what's happening. And I think that the common person, not just enterprise people, can understand that. And I think it's very important that they do. I'm terrified. I have been terrified from the beginning of those dogs looking all cute and doing the little dancing videos. It's just to cement that in our mind that, oh, they're cute and that's okay. Well, at the same time, they're down on the border doing very not okay things. So it's dangerous because what the other part of this is how our information is being gathered into one place. It's being dumbed down. It's being assigned different things. We're not doing anything to really take advantage of, there's not much being done to take advantage of what we can do with AI and go down that path and do the right thing with a program that's really, really good at math. Maybe that's a better word than machine.
Also, just piggybacking off what you said, Gina, there's also this so-called productivity paradox. So there's been a couple studies that came out. There was one from Workday and there's another from Camunda. And they basically show that employees are saving time with AI, but organizations are squandering productivity gains because they have to fix errors rather than strategic work, which underlines the importance of human beings. So it's a crude work in progress. And I think we should take that in mind when we say Person of the Year, that it's a moniker for achievement, but this is kind of an early stage in which we're going through a lot of trial and error.
I agree.
So let me I opened it up. I let people have their say. Let me now give me my. I'm going to cede back the time to the gentleman from New York here and respond.
I reclaim my time.
Yes, I reclaim my time. So, first of all, Guy, when you talk about simulation, I can't help but think about Matrix, red pill, blue pill. But wasn't that really an AI movie, and we just didn't know it back then? They did.
Oh yeah,
right. That was way before its time. Now, looking back at the Matrix, it was AI. We were jacked into some AI matrix, right? And thought that was reality. For all I know, you guys aren't real, and this whole thing is a simulation from some AI. But let me ask, here's the definitive question. I feel like I'm at the Scopes monkey trial. Let me ask the definitive question for you. You like that, Mike? Right? Let me ask the definitive question from my audience out there. How many of you have given a personal name to your AI? Or do you just call it ChatGPT or Anthropic or Claude or whatever? Gina, you're shaking your head, but I'll venture to bet, and folks watching this live on LinkedIn or X or wherever you're watching, if you want to weigh in. Have you given your AI a name? Because a lot of people I speak to have given their AI a name. And when you give your AI a name, you are, I forgot the word, Gina, you mentioned the word. Was it giving it human like? Yes, that's it. Right? And that's a clear signal of it. And the more people who are giving it a name, the more people who are treating it like that.
Listen, I say please and thank you to all the
you do
or whatever. I do, but you know why I do that? Because I don't want to start treating real people like I treat an AI, because I'm conversing with both of them. And also, by the way, when I say thank you, every single time I say thank you to the AI, that's a reminder to myself that this is not a person.
But interestingly,
AI though tells you don't do that because you're
right, because it spins up. You know how much
it's just
power
what works for you is what works for me.
Yeah,
anything that works for you to remind you that this is not a person.
I get it. How many of you out there say please or thank you?
The real people, how many?
I'm not us six.
AI.
I'm talking about out in the world there.
But the thing about a person, right? A person has empathy, unless they're a psychopath. But generally speaking, most people have empathy. And machines and this thing has no empathy. It has kind of a simulation of empathy is not empathy. So it can't be a person in my mind.
Look, half the time when I do voice to text, they don't understand my accent. So I know it ain't a person. I'm just saying.
Well, I think it's a common human trait to personify human traits into everything else, right? You name your dog.
Totally.
You expect your dog to act like a human. You talk to your AI, maybe. Treat it like it's a human. That is a super normal trait.
Human thing to do.
But I don't think I'm with Guy. I think if there was any other approach to look at what the actual impact of the last year, right, from the perspective of what AI has brought to the table, we can talk about whether or not it's good or it's bad. It's an unmistakable impact.
And that really, Fred, thank you, because that's the bow tie on tying the bow here. That really was the point, that this has been in 2025 and will be in 2026 the story of the year. And we see it here on Techstrong Gang. I try to follow it every day, no matter who's on the gang, what the gang lineup is. At least 2 out of every 3 stories are AI. 2 out of every 3 segments are AI related. And it's not just us, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Though I have a confession. I do like to talk to non-tech people about AI, because I think that's where you get the kind of the real deal view of how real this is, how useful it is, how widespread it's being used, what people really think of it. And there, I will tell you, there are a lot of people who are scared to death of it. A lot of people scared to death.
I'm
Can I just
looking
add one
forward to
thing?
when we have to re-socialize everyone to actually deal with humans again, because they're too wrapped up in their AI experience.
Well,
Guy?
I just wanted to add one thing, which is the AI that's like a person is really one kind of AI.
Right.
I was at CES this year, and one of the demos that I saw was from a company called Accelera AI. Most of what they do is computer vision related stuff. That is AI. That is longstanding AI. What they're doing is extremely sophisticated. So, they're getting a live stream of the show floor, and they use AI to identify people who are wearing backpacks or people who are talking or whatever it is. It wasn't just recognizing faces and people. That is AI in every respect. And I don't think anyone would get confused and think that that's a person, because there is no chat interface with that particular AI. And predictive AI, there's lots of different types of AI out there. It's just generative AI is the one that, along with LLMs, produces this kind of person feel to it.
Look, let's be real. We've been talking about AI for years. AI ops and machine learning and all that stuff. No one would give a flying you-know-what had it not been for ChatGPT and LLMs and generative AI bursting on the scene here. Was it November or December 2023 already?
November, yeah. It was
Of
November
2023. So, if you got it, flaunt it. That for many of us, when we talk about AI, that's still what we're talking about. And I think a lot of the agentic AI will still rely on models, background that maybe are generative. Anyway, we are over time here, though, on our opening segment. But just one last plug. Whether you go there now or wait till the show's over, do check out predict2026.com. There's some amazing, amazing stuff, as well as I'm announcing the winners of the DevOps Dozen, I think around 12:30. And we also have the RSA conference analysts talking about what's in store for RSA conference this year. Anyway, let's move over to B Block, gang. We've got Google's getting serious. That's SIRI. Mike, what do we got here?
So I think this deal has been a long time percolating. People have been talking about it, but it kind of plays into what we were just talking about. Siri was supposed to be my personal assistant, and Apple was going to lead the charge here, but then it turns out that maybe they faltered on AI and need a little help from Google. But John, you're closer to this. What's going on?
Well, a very wise man, one Mitch actually put it really well. He says the agreement basically signals this kind of pragmatic approach or phase in AI platform strategy. So as you mentioned, Mike, Apple has had some halting experiences with AI. In fact, they no longer have their AI head of development. They're looking for somebody. And in fact, this kind of plays into this whole idea that Apple's kind of making this decision to prioritize user experience and system integration over trying to compete in this arms race for LLMs. They did have an agreement with OpenAI. I think what this signals is Apple is taking, again, I'll use the word, a pragmatic approach to AI because they've stumbled so badly, and they've gone back to a partner who they've worked with for years in terms of search, which kind of got them in trouble for a while. But in a sense, it makes sense. And it's been percolating, as you said, for a long time. And I also think it's significant because coming down the pike, I believe there are a lot of rumors that Tim Cook is going to resign, is going to leave probably in the first half of this year and to be replaced by somebody on a more technical side. I think this is long overdue. And again, Apple, without trying to revolutionize everything, is kind of going down the lane they're comfortable in. in terms of accelerating Siri, which has been a major disappointment of late. So I think it's very pragmatic and very practical for both companies, and it was a long time coming.
Boy, first Mike Tomlin, now Tim Cook. John, I don't know how much of this I could take.
The Giants got a new coach. I'm happy.
Yeah,
Don't worry, Harbaugh's on the way.
yeah. Well, they're the Giants. That's why Mike's happy. But seriously, I didn't get a chance on this article. I'm assuming it is Gemini powered.
So yes, so Gemini will power the next generation of Siri, basically.
So
No, I don't see any monopolistic thing there.
Yeah, got him in trouble before, as I said. Yeah.
So in my house, there's an ongoing debate about, Google Android versus Apple. So those of us in the Google camp are wondering, well, if Apple needs Google to do AI, why not just stay with Android and my Google phone? And why am I going to go to the Apple phone? Just saying.
Well, security is a thing, Mike. So it's important to keep that in mind.
Spoken like a true Apple fan.
Yeah, it sounds like it sounds most to me like Apple is roughly licensing the model, and they'll probably contribute to model development, and may very well be hosting. I mean, Apple has a significant cloud of its own, and may well be hosting it. I applaud this in every sense imaginable, and I wish the entire industry would stand up and listen and pay attention to this, because I feel like even still to this day, in fact, the only people I think who might be unhappy, the only person who might be unhappy, although it's not his nature, is Jensen.
Sam?
At NVIDIA, the CEO of NVIDIA.
Jensen.
Only because I feel like there's been just so much emphasis on training. Everybody wants to have their own model. Everybody's jumping into whatever cloud-based model to start using it, but it's like the enterprise strategy started with train your own model. I mean, doesn't it feel that way? There's still this big hangover from that. And Apple itself acknowledging, hey, you know what? We might have, invested in OpenAI and a partnership with OpenAI and all that other sort of stuff, but we don't know how to make models. We just don't. We're just going to give up and work with somebody who does. And I wish, the industry as a whole, there's these foundational models that there's like six companies in the world right now. Maybe in China, there's more. I'm counting China as if it were one company, can really develop. I think one of them is going to go under soon enough, and eventually a few more, and then there'll be 3. But there's so much to do: tuning, additional training, small models, blah, 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 that you can do. And Apple will do that. Great.
So I have a different take on it. But Guy, you're right? Brad Feld always taught me you got to be in the top 3. If you're not in the top 3, get out. But here's the thing. Someone said it in the last segment about sort of, this is, I think it was John. This is kind of the first stage of AI, right? That we're living through right now. It's baby steps. I don't think for most tasks that we're going to use AI for going forward, you're going to need one of these. I call it a world model. I know world model has a different connotation than.
They're also called
LLM.
frontier models. Yeah.
Right. Let's call them frontier models. I don't think you're going to use the frontier models for most of the tasks you do, right? Because they're just too big, and to continue training them and keeping up with them is going to be a job that you're going to need to have $1 trillion kind of market cap to be the kind of company that does that, right? But I think the future is smaller models, specialized models, stuff that sits in front of that LLM. Remember, they estimate 90% of the information that we store digitally has not been used on the frontier models because it sits behind firewall. Yeah, that's who it was. I went to see my cardiologist, and he knows I'm a tech guy. And instead of checking my heart, we sit and talk about tech the whole time. And I was explaining to him, if we could take all of your patient data from your practice here. There's 4 different doctors at the practice. Feed that into a vector database, keeping it private, maybe anonymizing it, but using that data to help him better prescribe, better diagnose, better serve his patients. Would he do it? Right? Because he was one of these guys, I'm afraid AI is going to take my job, my kid's job, and I don't, he was very negative. I converted him. Saint Shimmy, patron saint of AI here. But that's I think the future. I think that's the future, not the frontier model for everyone.
I think we have to get back to what Fred said in privacy, and also just making sure that any kind of biases aren't baked into the models that we're putting our data into. So I think medical is a great example. One of the things that they found, and we don't talk enough at all about what actually is happening to retrain these models and to sharpen them. And that's all done by human labor. I'm actually participating in some of that because I wanted to know how it worked. And it's all done on a very time-based background. You have to go fast. If you don't go fast, you're out. So lots of mistakes are made. The people that are also hired to do the evaluation and to QA it also are trained on how fast they go and what happens. So all sorts of mistakes are being made. There's been studies where some of the traditional biases that doctors have just now started to overcome, as far as from different ethnic groups and kind of therapies that should be recommended, are sneaking back in. And my guess is it's because of some of this very, very fast pace of retraining and fine-tuning some of these models.
Yeah, but it's almost like a DevOps: iterate, reiterate, fail fast, iterate, reiterate, fail fast, reiterate. It will get, when you look at the DeepSeek, right, how were they able, well, depends if you believe they stole their stuff or not, but how are they able to churn out a model comparable to our best frontier models at a fraction? Because it was that forced training, that very rushed,
But that's what I'm saying. That's what's dangerous. What's dangerous is if it's rushed, and nobody's really paying attention to the details. That's where the finer parts of, especially specific things like medicine, that the bias, if all the literature is consumed and you got somebody that's not really a domain expert that's doing the checking, they're just an AI expert, and they understand how to look at a prompt and how to look at a matrix to judge the prompt. They're not looking at the content and how it will affect everybody. And enough of that happens, the bias remains in the model. And then if your cardiologist puts all his patient's data in there, the results may not be what he would think they would be, because then the results are based on this incorrect fine tuning. And there's already studies out about that this has happened.
That's assuming it's not a cardiologist who's training it. But let me give you another counter. Let's look at coding. There are a lot of people, including, I'm sure, people in front of me on this screen, who say, look, AI code is inherently insecure. Right? And historically, it has been. But when you look at the latest studies now, what we're seeing is the amount of vulnerabilities per X lines of code from human-generated, right, human-written code, non-AI assisted code. The amount of vulnerabilities per X amount of lines has been pretty steady. Right? It hasn't necessarily gone up a lot, hasn't necessarily gone down a lot. It's a baseline. When we look at the amount of vulnerabilities found in AI-generated code, yes, a year or two ago, it was ridiculously insecure, it couldn't even get basic syntax right. Then it started getting syntax right. And then it started really focusing in on making more secure code. They estimate that right now, AI-generated code is roughly generating as many vulnerabilities per X amount of lines as human-generated code. It's on par. The thing is, human-generated code is going to remain at that level, and the AI-generated code can continue to go down. And when it goes down appreciably, then then all of a sudden the human generated code is much more insecure. I think that's going to happen with AI in general. Iterate, reiterate, correct, right? We are rushing it now. It is new, but perspective, hindsight and all of that, it's going to continue coming down. So Fred, I'm interested in your thoughts on that.
There's two things here that I think are interesting. And I would say in expert training, an expert system, you're always going to have better results. And I think those are, so a cardiologist training a model with information he knows, you're still going to have better results than not. But I think the Apple announcement is really more pitted for the everyman, right, in this case. And so it's less about whether or not, model training and any of that, none of that is approachable to the everyman. And so now on my device, I have access to, a higher authority of information that allows me to utilize with greater capacity, a lot of the things that are on my phone. And the optimism of that is there are folks that have health conditions and they're not covered. And, you probably saw, but MedGemma 4B was released by Google this week, and it's got a 50 to 55%, accuracy. Now you're talking about you can't get in to see a cardiologist, or, the level and cost and understanding of your own healthcare is something you can manage. Should you go see an expert? Sure. But that's not on the plate for everybody. That's the optimism on that. But the concerns are, right, and we saw some of this happen this week. I participated in some of this. But the concerns are privacy. Apple has long held the grounds that privacy is tantamount. Google does not. And so there are implications here on the conflict, and the consumer will be at the behest of this conflict, the one in the crosshairs. And one instance of that occurrence was a good friend of mine put a LinkedIn post out about, his 13-year-old son was being notified by Google, right, how to subvert privacy controls, parental privacy controls, so that, on the 13th birthday, right, as they can move out of that COPA, aside, right, privacy experts are very concerned about the implications of that. Wow. And it's pervasive. So if you couple that accessibility with the implications of what that privacy exposure looks like, now you're starting to ask questions about whether or not the healthcare industry, based on your phone's behavior and your activities and things like this, may be able to qualify you or disqualify you from insurance, from healthcare, from other things, because the cost of those things or the value is that transferable part, not the information that you possess. Those are the concerns, right, around some of that futurist part of that.
All right.
Fred, you're just peeling back the very first layer of the blowback, repercussions, whatever you want to call it, that application of AI to our life is and to business is going to have. We can't predict 95% of what the repercussions are going to be.
All right, we got to bring this one to a close.
Yeah, we do. But I also want to acknowledge we've got some nice comments out in LinkedIn and other places here, and thank you very much. Thank you very much for the comments. We're still figuring out how to incorporate comments into our show. I got to get me a monitor that I could read right here on the desk, because it's hard for me to read it out on my monitor out there. But thanks for the comments. And I see one that says, "That's what I hear, Alan." Sounds like someone who agrees with me, so I wanted to call him out. Let's move on to our next C block, though, and that is Target Bullseye. So I read this and I had a deja vu. Was it the HVAC man or the butler? Mike, what's going on?
It was hacked, right? Yeah. So back in the day, Target was one of the first big scenarios where there was this hack of their HVAC system and they had a major breach. Now, it's not clear what's going on here. I mean, at the end of the day, some hacker somewhere has some code that they have shown that apparently belongs to Target, and they're saying they have the entire code base. And Target's supposed to do something about that with some sort of negotiation. But Fred, I want to start with you because I kind of feel like this is everybody in corporate America's worst nightmare, is to wake up one morning and discover that entire source code for your organization is now outside of the four walls of the proverbial enterprise. And are we going to see a lot more of this? I feel like the bad guys are like figuring out that the source code is like that key asset.
Absolutely. Full disclosure, I was at Target for 2 months in 2013, doing some cleanup work and analysis. And the impacts then aren't nearly the impacts today, to your point, Mike. One of the biggest concerns is, when you let somebody have access or they get access to your build systems, they have access to everything, not just the source code, but how you build the source code and what services you run, the types of technologies they have, and also all the tokens that you use to do that. And so there's a significant set of implications there. I would say gathering 860 gigs worth of data is a significant statement. So to your point, and also to conversations we've had about using some of the AI XCC vulnerability analysis capabilities that last Black Hat came and was deployed both in open source. The opportunity to find vulnerabilities in that, right, substantive, and also the cost is $500 a vuln to build them. So when we look at what the implications are, it's a long road for them to find and see the things that are occurring there. And without knowing, making all of the statements of things that we don't know about what the control space was, whether or not the IT budget had been cut, whether or not overseas management, whether or not, any number of other factors, things that we do know. If get.target.com is available without some zero trust access to that, and that is your build system, and it is an internally hosted environment, that if that were true, that's an incredibly dangerous thing to do. And some would say it's derelict. But in this particular case, the concerns that can happen is, like you said, a lot of the infrastructure can be exposed, not just the source code. So service names, IP addresses, environmental context, all of those components can echo for years, especially at the rate of change in an enterprise environment and an organization as big as Target. I'm sure the rapid advance to make changes to access, turning that off now, and adding VPN and zero trust gateway access for employees was something in the books, but obviously it's been hurried along now.
Fred, you know this. I've been in the security world a long time, really long time, 30 years. When this happened originally to Target in 2012, 2013, you were there. Over the couple of years after that, every year we do our DevSecOps event at RSA. And we were lucky enough to have some of the really good people at Target. Jennifer Kapelski, I think, is one. My friend Courtney Kistler from the DevOps community was there. Target did everything right after that breach to shore up. They were having internal dojos and all kinds of things. And they did an amazing job, right? We referenced the HVAC. It was a third-party supplier who happened to be an HVAC vendor who got into their system. The network was flat. Once they got into that HVAC vendor, they had the run of the place and took what they wanted. That was then. Target has come so far since then, though. They've done so many right things, good things, by the book, best practices. What this really shows you is it could happen to anyone, any company, anybody. It's just the nature of the beast. It's what keeps security people up at night and makes us depressed. Because when nothing happens, no one gives you an attaboy or a pat on the back, because that's what's expected. But when the stuff hits the fan, everybody's got it on their face. And So I'm genuinely sorry that it had to be Target that was part of it. It got hit here again, but it's collateral damage. It's the nature of the beast we fight with every day.
Gina, is this that proverbial wake-up call that we've all been waiting for, or are we just going to roll over and hit the snooze button one more time?
I hope people don't hit the snooze button. I mean, I agree with everything Alan and Fred said. You know, if they were back on track and they made such big gains, like, man, what happened? But from what I read, they know that there is at least one employee whose laptop was compromised. So I don't think they made any positive connections to that being the cause or anything yet. But I mean, that's how simple it could be. It could just be one person compromised, and then just a really bad decision to have Git open like that. It's hard to understand how a big company would do that. It has to be. I mean, security, if you care about your data and you care about your company, and Target's not in a place, this is not a good time for this to happen to Target, right?
No.
So they are already having a lot of issues just with sales in general. So this is not a great time for this to happen to them. So you got to wonder why. I mean, like Fred, why would anybody leave Git open, so accessible like that?
Well, and I want to echo also what Alan said. We can sit here and say, right, there's a zillion different ways that somebody can compromise a company, and I 100% agree. In 2013, even sitting around that table with a bunch of super talented security people, they were doing the right things then, right? It wasn't a question of whether or not that's the case. Today's universe, I want to say, is also a little bit different, right? We've also opened up a lot of outsourcing, right? We've enabled people to, from a development perspective, you start thinking about, are there implications about, I want to use, Copilot for this or this model for that, or there's a lot of ways that you could think about where that becomes more accessible than less. But it's a good question. I think a standing question, right? If I were to put, Shimmy, I'm going to put the CISO hat back on, you and I, right? From this perspective, I mean, we would say the garden wall and then the crown jewels. And when we think about what the dev environment would be, right, and the accessibility and the brokerage of what trust that has, right, is pretty much right in the center of that set of crown jewels. And so it is a little bit concerning that this is that available, especially with self-hosted. Normally folks self-host because they don't want to have a compromised cloud service, right, expose all of their source code, right? They probably were doubling down on this thing. So I want to get a little bit more information about it. I wasn't thrilled that there are folks that are saying, hey, so-and-so had an info stealer last year, and maybe that's why. Probably not the right time to, ambulance chase about what might have happened. And if you were my auditing firm and you came in and did that work and you thought it was important to tell the news that, and I didn't disclose that, we probably won't use you again, right? So there's probably more to it, like all things. But, it is Gina, it's a great question. Like that is an element of the crown jewels. Why is that accessible?
I don't mean to be mean here, but I'm going to say it. Look, if you're walking around Times Square at midnight with your wallet in your back pocket and you get robbed, I'm going to be sorry that happened to you. But at some point, I'm going to shake my head and say, it's a little bit on you.
Well, no, I don't think anyone's not saying that. I'm just saying, it could happen to anyone. But B, like Gina asked, why was Git open, right? And for those who aren't savvy to all this, here's the deal. You store code in a repo. A lot of people use Git. GitHub by Microsoft, probably the most famous or popular one in the world. That's a SaaS kind of thing. But for large organizations who don't want to trust their crown jewels to some third-party SaaS, Microsoft GitHub offers a GitHub Enterprise self-hosted version where you actually get to host Git yourself, right? You get your own GitHub, your own Git. You could secure it. You could bury it in the bottom of the ocean or in the sea or in the space or anywhere, but you get to really, lock it up. Well, why the heck wasn't it locked up here is the Gina,
the
that's what you're asking.
the
Why
mystery.
wasn't Git locked?
Doesn't make sense.
I don't know. Maybe it was locked and they had the keys, right? Who, you know, right now we're speculating, right? And Fred, I agree with you. What kind of auditor goes out onto the press and talks about stuff like this unless they're afraid it's coming back to them because maybe they didn't do such a great job on the audit or something. We could speculate till the cows come home. It'll come out over time. It'll come.
You know, but to leave Target alone for a minute, you know, I feel like there's probably a lot more of these repositories out there that don't have that level of security you just described. And for whatever reason, we're going to keep hearing about this more and more.
Job
and a choice
security.
between speed and security. We know what tends to win out.
Speed wins. Speed kills, though, too, Guy. On that note,
Sure.
hey, we're going to wrap up because you should go watch Predict 2026. I'm going to say it one more time. Predict2026.com. Fred, Gina, Guy, of course, John and Mike, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for people who comment. If you're not watching this live, you can catch us live every weekday, Monday to Friday. For those of you who might be wondering, I know next Monday's MLK Day. We may not publish a Techstrong, but I think we're going to have a special MLK Techstrong Gang episode. So stay tuned for that. Otherwise, gang members, thank you. Thank you. I'm Alan Shimel. We're out.